Hey, y'all. Welcome to the For Liberty and Justice podcast, where we mobilize a church, wake up the city, and take a stand for liberty and justice. My name is Taylor, and I'm so excited to be back for another exciting episode. Today, I am so excited to talk about one of my favorite topics. Here at For Liberty and Justice, we are a pro-life organization. It's a hill that we're willing to die on.
Yes.
Like, to our last breath, we will defend the unborn. But honestly, even more than that, for me, this is personal. What so many people don't realize is that on the other side of this decision, there's a mother. A lot of times there's a father, but there's always a baby. And for me, I was that baby. My parents were teenage parents. I was just one of the numbers. I literally had family members ask my parents to get an abortion to hide their shame and hide their mistakes to save their future. My parents chose life, and I'm forever grateful for them. The world issued a death decree over me, and instead they partnered with the word of God, and that just says you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and before I had formed you in the womb, I had set you apart. And honestly, like, this entire episode, like, I know we're supposed to, like, not dedicate it to these people, but this episode is for my parents.
Yeah.
Because my parents' one moment of bravery brought me to this moment where I get to speak about something I am absolutely passionate about. And I pray that there is a mom on the other side of this podcast who is hearing what we are talking about from a point of compassion, and that she chooses life. Like, their decision of bravery kept me from being one of the millions of babies who have been murdered since Roe passed.
It's good.
And so I'm just excited because tonight I am celebrating my parents.
Yeah.
Like, my legacy is life because of their bravery as 19-year-olds.
Yeah, it's big.
And I get to share this platform with two of the guys who are working so hard in this field to create a lasting legacy of life for other people. And so I'm absolutely honored that I get to have the most pro-life politician in the country.
Let's go.
Nate Schatzline
Taking that
from
to the bank.
District 93 in our studio today, one of my dearest friends. And we also have Dr. John Seago. You are the president of Texas Right to Life.
Right.
I honor you for the work that you have done, you are doing, and that you will do.
Awesome.
Because it has such a kingdom impact.
Yes.
And I don't even know if you understand the gravity of what you're doing, but this is not just for a moment in time. This is for our future. And so I honor you. And I truly believe in my heart of hearts, all of the kingdom of God honors you for what you're doing.
Awesome. Well,
You
thank
too,
you.
Nate. So you guys, welcome to our show.
Yes.
It's going to be awesome.
Well, I think this is a big one. You know, after the overturning of Roe v. Wade, which I know we'll get into, I think this became one of the central issues state by state basis that was important for what I believe the church, which is really the audience that our podcast speaks to. The majority of our audience is going to be Christians, it's going to be Texans, it's going to be, and we have outside of Texas, but ultimately it's believers that know that the pro-life issue is not just something to chip off, you know, from our list. This is like what we all bled and died for, and many of the reasons why we got involved in politics. The pro-life issue was why I got into politics. It was on a jog where I caught a burden for the unborn, and in my prayer time where I felt like the Lord called me to be a part of this fight. And so for me, my first one of my first English papers that I wrote that I still have documentation of was the case for life and what would have happened if Mary was pro-choice in the Bible. And so, like, this is in public school, and it was awesome because I didn't know if my teacher was a believer or not. I was in 7th grade, and I wrote this paper, and my dad has this framed up, super proud dad. But I'll never forget, one of the coolest moments was getting the notes back on my paper, and it was my teacher that just simply wrote something to the degree of, you know, thank God that, you know, Mary chose life, and imagine if, and she went down the list of, you know, biblical people, imagine if they wouldn't have been, you know.
Yeah.
And it was just that acknowledgement. And I think I think looking back all the way to 7th grade, recognizing even a child, my children, your children, they recognize the sanctity of life. Our founders recognize the sanctity of life. This is, for me, such a no-brainer, and we are seeing an all-out attack from the media, from modern culture, to Hollywood, you name it, and they are doing so. They're attacking by taking away the language and renaming things and perverting things and calling it, women's rights and choice. And it's evil. And so I'm excited to have John on the show today because John, you might not know this, but Texas Right to Life was the first major endorsement of my entire political career.
Sweet.
And so, you guys came in when no one believed. And so it was just really cool for that to be, and I was proud of that. I was like, if there was any organization that I was proud to have the endorsement of, it was Texas Right to Life. Good. And so when y'all came in, it gave some validity to the character that I plan to bring into the Texas House, and everything y'all do, you truly hold the line, and I just appreciate you, man.
Good. Well, you had Matt Krause on your side, and so that was
big.
That was what got us in the door. If Matt's gonna vouch for you, then we have to look into it. So happy to do that. Yeah, this is an important issue, and I appreciate you guys, making it a priority. And I've heard on other episodes you guys say that this is the hill to die on, and it seems like a lot of our politicians are trying to figure out which hills they can slowly tiptoe down, right? Get away from. We don't want to fight on that hill. And so I appreciate you guys being there. And for us at Texas Right to Life, we are the largest, the oldest pro-life organization in the state. We're also a Christian organization. And that's something that is critical, and is that we, are explicitly Christian. And I don't go around the Capitol lobbying, with Bible verses, but it does inform how we lobby. It does inform how we prioritize things, positions that we take. It informs our endorsements. Right now, we when we endorse someone, we ask them the hard questions. We ask them, are you willing to be held to a Christian standard of conduct, right? That's are you going, because it's a public witness. For me as a Christian organization, if I say, vote for this guy, then I'm saying something about your character. And a lot of our elected officials are not happy about that.
Totally.
They do not like us to ask. And so I ask, first, are you willing to be held accountable to a Christian standard? And second, is there anything in your past or your present that would be a blemish on your public witness as a Christian?
So good.
They hate this. Now, to their credit, I had a great conversation with a rep, an incumbent, on the way down here, and I had never been able to ask him that, and he wanted us to re-endorse, and so I had that conversation with him, and he was fantastic. He was great. But that's not usually the answer I get. Usually it's like, hey, I just I'm going to vote for you. I think that's the most important thing. We don't need to be in each other's personal lives. And for me, it's okay. I get it. You're not,
Yeah.
So, but as us, because this is really, at the end of the day, those moral failures are spiritual attacks.
Yeah.
A lot of times because there is a spiritual element to this work that we can't afford to ignore. And so I tell my staff that, my board, everybody, we know that this is a ministry. Whenever we come, because God is calling us to stand up for the voiceless, to establish justice and righteousness in our land. And so when we are working there, we should be prepared for attacks of the enemy.
It's good.
And for politicians, unfortunately, it looks like scandal. It looks like poor judgment. It looks like bad decisions. So we do that, and some people don't really like that we ask those questions, but it is, and everything we do at Right to Life, we try to inform by our faith, by Scripture. And it's a really critical foundation. I think we can make good secular arguments with our friends who don't have our worldview. I have a master's and a doctorate in bioethics, and so there are a lot of great ethical arguments that we can make, scientific arguments we can make. However, for us to be consistent, for you to be able to stay strong in the Capitol, for us to have the hard questions with our conversations with our friends, we have to have faith. We have to have the Holy Spirit. And so I'm really pumped to be here with you guys and just share a lot in common with y'all, and happy to have this conversation.
So many just pockets of questions I have off of everything you just said.
We could spend an hour.
Oh my gosh, we're about to dig in. So I just have to ask this, and then I'll let Taylor please take over. But the thing that you said that was so good to me, so whenever I was chasing after an endorsement for Texas Right to Life from the beginning, I'll never forget going into my interview. I did not realize at the time how overtly Christian-based y'all were, and it was so refreshing. Because getting into that, and to be honest with you, the interview was intense. Like, I showed up at the headquarters, and I walked into the room, and it's like 5 people looking at me, and everyone just, I felt like, expected that I wasn't the real deal, which is good.
Oh, yeah.
You come in like, okay, and then, but it ended up really good, and I just so appreciate the integrity of that. Something you said there that just sparked is that out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, is what Scripture says. And what I found is when we look at integrity with lawmakers, if you find a chink in the armor in one area, it will affect the other ideological preferences of that politician. Because if you're willing to bend a knee in this area of your life, why wouldn't you be willing to bend a knee here if it lends to your benefit? And so my greatest issue right now in navigating in the legislature is understanding that I will take someone at their word if their honesty is shown in all aspects of their life. The problem is that we see lies on a regular basis, and once a politician who, mind you, might say Christian conservative in their bio and on their campaign materials, is very dishonest in one area, given you're dishonest about a bill, or you're dishonest in your marriage, or you're dishonest in your personal life. The moment that takes place, it's should be noted that it's possible you might not be able to trust him in all other areas as well, it doesn't mean that we require perfection in the legislature. It's not it, but honesty, to me, is the core principle of legislating properly, especially when it comes to life, because you've seen this on a regular basis. Is we will have a bill come up inside the Texas House, and I can speak to the fact that it will be being shouted as the greatest thing since sliced bread from every politician, which typically means it's going to pass. If you see leadership shouting, greatest bill of all time, greatest property tax cut in the history of America. And you're like, all right, got it. You guys are going to pass this bill. We get it. This is for your primary. That's what it is. And it's so funny. My litmus test on if a politician is honest or not is, will he say the good and the bad about bills that we're proud of? So, for example, HB1 that didn't pass, our school choice bill, big school choice person here, love it, want education freedom for all families and empower parents. The bill wasn't great. Like, it was kind of bad. And like, there was all these horrible things mixed in with like some good as well. But like, when you're talking to a politician, you can very quickly see if they're an honest person by if they're willing to say all aspects of the bills that we're passing and not passing. So
it's so, I mean, when from the lobby side, we, speaking the truth, it's a disadvantage. Like to say that, to say, yes, this bill, it has this element in it. When the person you're talking to, they're not going to like this part. And it's kind of like just war theory. Like, as Christians, we do, and as a Christian nation, we do war a certain way. We're not going to fire on civilians. We're only, that puts us at a disadvantage. That puts our veterans, that puts our military guys, at a serious disadvantage. But because of our morals, we're going to do that. We're saying this is the right way to engage. And I kind of feel the same way in the Capitol of yes, it would be easier if I would just walk in your office and just, promise you the world to get your vote. And, but we can't do that. At the end of the day, okay, I got your vote, but I've sinned and the Lord sees what I did in that minute. And so it's so our team, our legislative team, we have a great legislative director. She has a great team working in the Capitol full time, and they try to walk out Christian, our Christian principles, even in something that is as worldly, as corrupt as lobbying and politics. And so you're absolutely right. We should expect that from our lobbies groups. We should expect that from our elected officials as well.
It's good.
So you've already talked a little bit about your process and what you do. I want to hear a little bit more about Texas Right to Life. So it's not just you're defending the unborn. You're defending life on the other end of
Right.
the spectrum as well.
Yeah, so Texas Right to Life, we work on protecting innocent human life from fertilization until natural death.
Yeah.
And so whenever we look at kind of like the biblical model of justice, you see the Old Testament talks a lot about specific populations, right? It talks about widows, it talks about orphans, it talks about the foreigner. And the reason that it keeps mentioning those is because in that context, those were the groups of people that were left out the most, that were overlooked the most, were abused the most. And so for us in our culture, we have to look at where are populations in our society that are vulnerable to injustices, who could be taken advantage of, who could be suffering violence, who could be, completely devalued. And so for us, when we look at from fertilization until natural death, we try to identify who are those victims in our state. And unborn children are a huge one. Preborn children are their personhood, their value is completely overlooked by an industry that is trying to convince women, hey, this is in your best interest. This is a question just about, for you. Don't think about a whole nother population, a whole nother person in the question. We do consider expecting mothers to be, in that triad of victims as well, is that they are constantly receiving, the messaging, the kind of advertising and the pressure of, hey, this is in your best interest. Yeah. There's no way you could succeed in your degree, your college degree. There's no way you could compete in the marketplace. There's no way you could be financially stable or have steady housing if you have this child, right? And so they're also fighting that. So we consider them. The other big population that we've identified, and there are others, but the big three would be preborn children, expecting mothers, and vulnerable patients. Vulnerable patients are the same ethic that says you don't qualify. You haven't gotten something that gives you value. Like with children, it's you're in the womb, and so once you get out here, then we'll recognize you. The same thing is going on in our hospitals, unfortunately, with vulnerable patients because they're not conscious, because they are dying, or because they're elderly, or they're disabled, or they're never going to be able to go get a job and actually contribute to the economy again. For whatever reason, they are targeted, and their right to life is taken away. And so that's why those are the big three populations that we focus on at Texas Right to Life, and we do it through legislation, working in the Capitol with legislators on what our laws should be. We do it on college campuses. A huge part of Texas Right to Life is our college scholarship program. Our college scholarship program, we give pro-life students scholarships to go and start or lead pro-life groups on their college campuses. And we don't just give them money, we don't just come and speak, we actually mentor them. So we train them in the summer, they have week-long training every summer that they're in our program, and then we actually mentor them. So weekly conversations with them of what are they doing, and that is critical because college campuses, especially now in kind of post-Roe, college campuses are like this where the sidewalk counseling happens. And college campuses are so hostile to our message. They're so hostile to just truth, not even our views politically, just basic stuff, right? About even what the child is, scientifically speaking. And so we have a huge focus on college campuses, and then on college campuses we engage on the abortion issue and on assisted suicide. We ask a lot of this. And then the third thing that we do in these areas is advocacy. And so we actually set up an office, a department in Texas Right to Life to be patient advocates. So families around the state, when a hospital is devaluing their loved one, when a hospital is trying to force decisions on them or to withdraw treatment, they call Texas Right to Life. They call our advocacy, our patient assistance hotline, and we have a team that talks through them, gives them advice, and then they actually go. And unfortunately in Texas we have a law where an ethics committee could decide to withdraw a ventilator from a patient, even if that patient wants it, even if that patient's loved one wants it. And when there's those conflicts going on, our team shows up. We actually go. And we had a big case here in Fort Worth, Tinsley Lewis.
Yeah,
and
baby Tinsley.
Yeah, baby Tinsley. So Tinsley Lewis, her mother was there in the hospital saying, no, continue the ventilator. And this hospital administration and this ethics committee said, no, we don't think it's worth it. We don't think she's ever going to recover from this situation. And so they were trying to withdraw treatment. We got involved. Long legal battle, but more than 4 years later today, Tinsley's alive. And so it's just, those are stories like that. And it doesn't matter if it's a baby. We actually had an 80-year-old a couple of weeks ago that we advocated for, and she got to go home. She lived another 2 months with her family. And then she passed away naturally. Yeah. And that's a success story in our book, right?
Yes.
Is natural death allowing for those important decisions to be made by families. So that's a little bit of the scope of issues that we get involved in. On patients' rights, that's a whole can of worms. We do get involved in organ donation, brain death, debate about brain death. There's a lot going on in our health system, healthcare system that is devaluing life. Yeah. Is really setting patients against one another. And so we are more increasingly getting involved in those rights. That's why I went and got my master's, because I worked at Texas Right to Life, saw some of the debates in the medical ethics side of things in the Capitol. Then I decided, okay, what in the world is going on in ethics, in bioethics? And so then I went back and got my master's and doctorate in it for those issues specifically, right? And unfortunately, it's neglected by a lot of pro-life groups, but we're trying to change that. We're trying to encourage all of our friends to.
I would love to have you back for an episode solely based on this, because as a former ICU nurse, I have seen it all. I have had to participate in it all.
Yeah.
Okay, because the second a government entity is allowed to decide your value as a human being, our place as a nation is over.
Yeah.
Like, that is a slippery slope to just a depraved nation, and that's where we're at with the abortion fight. Well, let's that we're devaluing the unborn.
Yeah, we can talk about the trend of assisted suicide is its own issue, and it is unfortunately making progress in other states, and we see those trends here in Texas. Yeah, you're right. That's a whole nother can of worms, but those same ethics, those same values are there. And just because I know your audience is most of your audience is Christians, we do believe that each individual human being has value because they were created by God, and that the God created them in His image, right? And so Jesus Christ is the image of God. We were created in the image of God, and so for Christians we look at that, and we also look at justification. Is that whenever we learn in Scripture that no matter where you were born, no matter who your family was, if you can, look at your family tree and find Abraham, it doesn't matter. You have to go through Jesus Christ to be saved.
Yes.
You have to believe and have a saving faith in Jesus Christ. That doctrine itself is also pro-life, because that means every human being is equal. We're all on the same playing field. We all need the salvation of Jesus Christ. And so for our Christian audience, I would just encourage you to think about that, is whenever we look at why we're pro-life and all humans are equal, not just creation, but also justification, is it levels the playing field. No matter how good you are, what your family is, the color of your skin, how you sound, how you act, it's a level playing field, and every human being is valuable. So anyway, these are the kind of things that motivate us at Texas Right to Life.
So everything you just said was really important, I think, for our listeners to hear, because ultimately, one of the things that I love to highlight in y'all's organization is your degree is so pivotal, especially when you consider a lot of pro-life organizations, though they mean well, are not usually rooted in severe science. So when you talk about your degree, tell us, did it strengthen your pro-life stance when you went to get it? Talk to us a little bit about the science that led you to be an even stronger advocate post-university, whereas we're seeing Gen Z and, even Gen Alpha as they're coming up, they're clearly being attacked in the mind. Yeah. The science pushed you closer to God's view. Yeah. I just think that's powerful.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So, that's the foundation of Texas Right to Life. Is our founder, Dr. Joseph Graham, He was a moral philosopher professor at University of St. Thomas in Houston. And so that's why he got into this, is because he taught theology, he taught philosophy and ethics there, for decades. And then him and his colleagues started seeing the shift in culture. And so, late 60s started seeing what was being justified, including in the academy, but not in his academy, a great school, but, in others, and what was kind of the justification. And so that's why they started Texas Right to Life, is to kind of stand for life whenever they saw a culture moving away with a sexual revolution, with some of the things going on in Colorado. And so, so that's kind of, they started. So it was on an intellectual foundation to begin with. Kind of a biblical anthropology, what do we believe about humans? Why are they special? Why are they different? And so for me, I was like a philosophy nerd. I was interested in government and how to be a Christian in government. That's why I volunteered for Texas Right to Life right out of high school. And so I was learning, a lot of philosophy, a lot of ethics, and interested in it. And as I learned the science, kind of in-house at Texas Right to Life, I was like, oh, of course. Like, I believed it biblically, I believed it ethically, but starting to see, oh, this is consistent. When I went back for my master's and doctorate, I learned that, like, we're kind of treated like the crazy ones in the conversation, but I learned, like, this is the norm. Like, this, like protect, like, these values of, valuing life and respecting the autonomy of patients, and, like, that has been the norm for hundreds and hundreds of years in Western civilization. It is just in the last 30, 40 years that the culture has been shifting. Yes. So for us to say, like, a mother should be protected and her child should be protected, and that we should treat that as two human beings, that's not like a novel idea, right? That is fundamental into the foundation of Western medicine. And it is just recently that now there's this kind of new kind of framing where you're pitting mother and child against one another. Yeah. That's a new development. And so that was one of the most encouraging things to me, is to see, like, oh, we are standing on the shoulders of giants, like things that we take for granted. It's good. It really is. And then every month there's a new study that comes out that talks about what's going on in the womb, what children are learning, speech patterns, what they're learning about hostile environments versus safe environments. It's just like, it's amazing. It's so overwhelming. One of the ones I just read was the speech patterns, that children develop their speech patterns in utero by hearing the cadence of their mother's voice. And so even though, so children, like, if your mother has an accent, a strong regional accent, even though you have never been to that place, but she has a strong regional accent, you will have those same kind of rhythms in your speech because you were learning in the womb, right? And so it's like, there's so much like that going on that we, like, in the creation of children and their mothers, that it's just like, we're barely scratching the surface, We see we see pictures of children at 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and we're just blown away. There's so much going on. Creation, is wise and beautiful, and science is just barely catching up to realize how amazing it is.
God, that's so good. Like, and that just blows my mind. The speech patterns that at that stage moms are, and here's the problem: is, like, even in politics, right? Like, it's so nuanced. Like, people don't want to even acknowledge these. When I talk to Democrats on this issue, like on the Texas House, they won't even have a legitimate conversation with us. They won't call it a child. They won't call it anything. It is so just a wall that we hit when talking to Democrats, which is why it becomes incredibly difficult to get things done if you have a legislative body that is majority Democrat, which is ironic to me because we have so many Democrats across America that claim to be Christians. For me, the life issue is not an R versus D issue. Yeah. It truly is a moral issue. Mm-hmm. And so it's shocking. One
of the shocking things for me when I first started was I would be in meetings with Democrats who were pro-life, who like I had one elected official tell me that, like, she talked her granddaughter out of an abortion like the year before that session, but she votes solidly pro-abortion every time. Like I couldn't get her vote on any of my bills, but she was just telling me, "Oh, I believe in what you believe. I don't think it's best for my grandchild." That's like she's like.
So you think it's just
pro-life.
solely based off re-election?
But because of the caucus, is that she'll be betrayed by the party, and she just blatantly told me that, and I was like, what? Like how? It's such a fundamental issue. I mean, like different property tax, income tax. Like we can have debates about like policy solutions to where we are. This one is like so fundamental. And it's like gets to the core of human beings, like who we are, what we value, what is most important, and in life. It's like so fundamental. It's just hard for me to think this would be one of those where it's like, I guess I'll just go with the caucus on this.
Yeah.
Some of the harshest words in the Bible were saved for those who harm children. And
Yes.
and your vote has a lasting effect that's going to be written down.
Yeah.
You're going to stand before the Lord one day.
There's a weight to it. I the only way I can describe it is like all throughout session. Obviously, I'm a freshman in the Texas House, so I've only gone through one session, but I guess I've gone through multiple because we've had 4 specials in my
You've
1
been
year.
to as many sessions
Yeah.
as like people in the past have. Like you have been seated for years.
I was determined when I got into the Texas House that pressing that button would not become so monotonous that it would be meaningless as I pressed it.
Yeah.
To the point where I've seen members of the Texas House not even look at the bills they're voting for that day, just blindly trusting their staff members to give them recommendations, or some caucus that they serve in, or God forbid the Republican caucus that literally doesn't, give any strong, conservative endorsements at all to bills. It's just kind of, what they think is going to pass. And I've looked at it and I've watched members just carelessly press buttons that have been in for decades. The members, to them, it's monotonous. To them, it's nothing. To me, I'm forming history with the pressing of this button. We are literally approving or disapproving of what we want for the next generation. We are planting the future landscape for what our grandchildren will be walking through in Texas. And it's just mind-boggling as we look at some of these bills and we have the audacity to go through just kind of nonchalantly. And so some of the things that I think have been huge wins for Texas since I've been in for on the life issue, Roe v. Wade was overturned. And again, we got to talk about that and the impacts that's had at the state level. But Roe v. Wade's overturned. Automatically, in Texas, abortion is presumably outlawed at that point, to where, it's illegal to have an abortion in the state of Texas on paper when we look at legislation, whether that be through the trigger bill or whether that be through just retroactive legislation from the past that protects life. So we see this, and so getting in at such a pivotal point as my freshman session, knowing, okay, there will be an all-out attack on this issue. I'm grateful that we did not give up ground on the life issue. However, I'm not satisfied with the victories we've gained thus far. One of the biggest victories was doubling the amount of money that goes towards alternatives to abortion. That was a big win for us, and that was something that I was proud that the Texas House did. Other areas of looking
60% increase.
60% increase.
Yeah. Not a double.
Will you lean into that and talk more about these alternatives?
So 60% increase.
So you guys voted for a doubling, but then it went to conference committee and it got $40 million disappeared. So you guys voted for...
Wow, that's incredible feedback that I am learning right now.
So the House, and I'm, you don't hear this from conservative organizations, but the House led on this, right?
I was going to say, I voted for a double.
Yeah,
John.
you did. So we doubled it to 200. And then we were working on, there was another amendment for supplemental funding for back. So when you sent your funding bills to the Senate, it had $225 million allocated for the Alternatives to Abortion program. When it came back to you in the conference committee, it was 165 total.
Wow.
So got shaved down.
Can I say how significant that is? Because I'm so glad you brought this up. These are the things that are done behind closed doors that we rarely even have the time to acknowledge. Because if I'm correct on this, us approving that budget was the same 48-hour period of the sham impeachment of Ken Paxton.
Yeah. So you got a huge document put on your desk of this is the conference committee, and in 2 days you're going to vote for this, and
By the way, we're impeaching an elected official for the state of Texas. Same time frame, which is what's so bizarre, and really what I believe is a true crime that took place in the state of Texas. I know that's not what this episode is about, but it's moments like that when we see the corruption in Texas politics, where things like that can be missed, that just completely derail what we intended from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And so, and on top of that, what I truly believe, and I want you to speak to this too, and I believe the future of pro-life legislation has to include lowering barriers to adoption.
Yeah.
Like, I believe it has to.
Absolutely.
Because the polling right now, as much as we don't want to acknowledge it, is showing that this is the hill that Republicans will never win another election.
Yeah.
However, I'm of the nature of I'd rather lose every election than give up ground on this issue. Can you speak to that? Kind of speak to where you guys see that going?
Yeah, let me just close circle on the Alternatives to Abortion program. So the Alternatives to Abortion program is a fee-for-service program we've set up in Texas where pregnancy centers, adoption agencies, social service offices, maternity homes, they can serve women and then be reimbursed for that service.
Incredible.
And so you have to be qualified. You have to get approved. And you have to be brought into the program. But this money goes towards those services for women who are in need, and it serves them for up until their child is 3 years old. And so your local pregnancy center qualifies to be in that program, could be in that program. Now, some don't want to get involved in the government. I understand that completely. But we have a lot, especially here in DFW, a lot of great providers that this is a great, they're going to do the ministry no matter what, but now they're getting reimbursed for serving women, helping them overcome those barriers that they're immediately looking at when expecting. So it's a fantastic program, and we have to be careful with the funding, make sure it's fully funded, but also make sure that, especially post-Roe, that the bureaucrats don't start taking it off. And we started seeing that this session, is let's use this program for other things, because Roe is gone. And I actually heard this unfortunately from a senator, is that women in Texas aren't considering abortion anymore. And so we can use this money for housing, stable housing, and for, economic stability or economic independence, all these other good things that I'm like, yes, and not take that money away from the pro-life program. So that's the Alternatives to Abortion program.
Can I piggyback off the soapbox for a moment? I'm sorry, this is one of my triggers. I am sorry for everyone who's catching this one. It's not just up to the government, though, for this. This is the opportunity for the church to rise up.
Yep, it's good.
They are slacking. It's like, check for the pro-life. Like, I voted for Nate Schatzline. My job's done. Your job does not end the second a woman chooses life. That's when actually your job is beginning.
Yes.
Some of the worst moments my parents recalled about raising me as teen parents came from members of the church shaming them. Your first job is when you see a mom who has chosen life, who looked the death machine in the face and said, no, you will not claim my child. That is where your job begins as a believer. And if you are one of those people who are going to shame an unwed mother for choosing life, shame on you. You need to reevaluate your choices.
Yes.
And if you don't, there is a hot place and a very dark place for you.
Yeah.
Because it is your job right now to start coming, the government is not the solution to everything.
Right.
But this is an opportunity where the church needs to rise up and start partnering with government organizations and these programs that are happening.
Yeah.
Because this is an awesome time to witness to these moms who need it.
Well, think about when that woman is going into that center that the government is reimbursing services for, look at what has already failed. I mean, education, family, the father in the situation, where's the accountability? Where's the mentoring for him? There have been so many spiritual failures already. And where was the church? The church should have been in every chapter of that story until we got here. Yes. And so you're absolutely right. On the once we have a woman who's facing this situation and has these barriers, absolutely. But the church also has to be there to make men be responsible.
We've let the world take over our jobs.
Yeah.
And we're paying the price.
You're absolutely right. And that's one of the things of we're talking about like the fruit, you know, like of the tree, and there are, you know, branches and there are roots, and there is a lot more spiritually going on that our churches, if they're not actually being biblical churches, that they're failing at. So you're absolutely right about that.
Well, and it's ironic too. We've allowed culture to control these things where, you know, if you looked at the natural media of today, you would think that there's a Planned Parenthood on every street corner, right? The comparison between the amount of crisis pregnant centers and Planned Parenthood is we're winning on the amount of people that are jumping in.
Right.
It's the funding that's so low. We've got everyone and their mom, from Hollywood to the media towards the left-wing portion of our nation, is willing to fund Planned Parenthood at all levels. I mean, every federal grant you can imagine,
they have
are
an
all
entire
in.
month dedicated to it, but it's absolutely clouded by breast cancer awareness.
Yes.
Susan G. Komen's the number one, at least they used to be the number one donor to Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
Well, and here it really comes down to where I believe we can go on a policy side. So from a policy perspective, one of the statistics, and tell me if this is right or wrong, because I heard this statistic from your viewpoint. Do you believe this statistic to be the case? I've heard that our number of abortions since Roe was overturned, our number of abortions has dropped 97%. However, I've also heard the statistic that our medicated abortions via telehealth have increased 136%, meaning the abortion pill that's coming in. To me, I can't imagine a worse nightmare than a young lady alone in a bathroom in her home take an abortion pill at any stage of pregnancy, because rarely are they educated to the level of which they could even safely take this pill. And it's kind of an oxymoron to say safely take a pill that's murdering a child inside of you.
And people don't realize how harsh this is. Like if a woman has ever had a miscarriage, they understand what this is, and this is force. This is putting your body through something it was not intended to do.
Yeah.
Do you believe those statistics to be the case?
Yeah, so, I mean, this is kind of like, this is where our job as a pro-life movement is to speak the truth right now. And right now, it's the false narratives that are out there. And so one of the false narratives is that there are no abortions in Texas, right? So
I've heard it from legislators.
Yeah, so we do have illegal abortions. There are organizations, criminal organizations, a couple of them my organization is suing in San Antonio, that their mission, if you go to their website, their reason to exist is to aid and abet illegal abortions.
Wow.
That is a nonprofit. They're raising all kinds of money like you talked about. So we're going after them. We have a lawsuit in San Antonio. We're about to launch some other litigation later this year, stopping these trends. The other one is the illegal websites. Illegal websites that are not in Texas, not run in Texas, but they're mailing abortion pills directly to women. And those, back to those college campuses, those are the targets. So if you go here to your local, university, here in Fort Worth, for example, if you go down to TCU and you go to a public restroom, you will go and you will see, and I don't know if it's there right now, but last time I was on campus, I saw they had a sticker that said, "Do you want to be unpregnant?"
Wow.
And it had a QR code. And if you scan that QR code, it goes to one of these illegal websites, and you can have abortion pills in your mailbox in your dorm room by the end of the week.
We can't even get free insulin for people who need it.
That's nuts.
I need people to know the severity of this.
It's amazing.
We can't help our diabetics, but we can help people kill babies.
And that is what so in the last 2 years, with all the great victories, and there are victories. I mean, tens of thousands of children are being saved in Texas. But there still are these other trends, not even just women traveling outside of the state, but also the illegal abortions going on here in Texas. And so at Texas Right to Life, we feel like we're kind of in a unique spot where we can start attacking some of these trends where our friends in Oklahoma, our friends in Kansas, our friends in other states can't, because they're playing defense. We in Texas, we need to lead the way on this. So on enforcing our laws, but also on what you're talking about with your adoption bill, Texas needs to be more bold in kind of moving into this new chapter, whereas our friends like in Ohio are just getting completely, defeated and having to fight, start their fight over. That's not here. Our Constitution is hard to change, praise the Lord. And
and that is a good thing.
It is. Our Constitution is difficult to change, and the Republicans that want to add exceptions, they've at least been scared off for now. Right? There are 6 of them we identify. They're still in office.
That's
they
so
want
great
to
that
go.
You know the exact names.
Oh yeah, They want to go and they want to add exceptions to our laws. We're watching them very closely. They at least have gone back into the shadows for now. So in that, while we have this reprieve, let's go after these trends. Let's build a great adoption system. Let's continue to make progress where other states can't.
The two bills that I think are pivotal for us to pass in Texas from a legislative perspective, because for those of you who don't understand, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, it didn't mean that abortion was illegal in America. It means that the states now have the power to legislate on the issue of abortion. And so we now come back to Texas, which we're blessed to be in a pro-life state, as you were just saying. However, the two greatest barriers to us truly being the pro-life state that we need to be are the fact that medically induced abortions through the abortion pill or Plan C pill, whatever you want to call it, and there's different forms of it. It's very hard for us to regulate because, that's regulated at the federal level. However, we did identify when it comes to the abortion bill, and I filed a bill that we had written and that we worked on with some other legislators. I want to talk about the risks with this bill, but I also want to talk about the fact that there are solutions, and y'all have been on the forefront of coming up with solutions of this. We've talked to your team when we were working on this bill because ultimately we have to have experts in this field to understand how do we tackle this where it's actually going to be effective because, in Texas, I can only speak to Texas, we are the kings and queens of coming up with laws that sound great and do nothing. And so you see them on the books all the time, and some of them you'll see them celebrated as, the greatest conservative victory of all time. And in reality, it does nothing, and it actually hurts our cause because people think the issue is solved when it's not. And so this banning the abortion pill, one of the angles that I want to take from the beginning is the same way that we attacked the pornographic viewing of pornography for minors, which is making sure that we have ID technology online, that if they're going to purchase the abortion pill online, then they have to upload an ID. And one of the ways that we could deter is if it's a Texas ID, then that company is now liable for breaking Texas law because you cannot send it there. Or if it's a Texas address. And that would give us, the ability to at least regulate this to an extent, and of course people can fake IDs. Of course people can do this or that. However, in the same way that Pornhub was shut down in many ways through the law of, HB 1181, I feel like we could do something very similar. And granted, this is going to go to the courts. This is going to be sued out of our mind. But, we have one of the greatest attorney generals in America that's there. But this is one of the issues. What is the solutions that Texas Right to Life is working on that? Is this something that you think we can actually get done? Because the excuses I've heard from other legislators when I brought this bill up, because I couldn't even get a hearing for this bill. Couldn't even get a hearing for it. And my adoption assistance program, which we'll talk more about, got a hearing, got it through committee, got it to the floor. I mean, the whole 9 yards. This bill couldn't even get a hearing. And the excuse was, well, Nate, you have to be careful. These were conservatives telling me this. You have to be careful because if you put a bill that has anything to do with abortion, then they could try to add exceptions to abortion and put that and codify that into law. My dilemma is that doesn't mean we can just roll over and let it be. What's the solution?
That was the frustration of the session, is that anything that was remotely on the enforcement side got shut down on that. And they assured us, oh, don't worry, we're not going to let, exceptions, and it's like that was never assumed. Like, I've looked at the numbers, right? And of the House. And so it was like, I was not worried about a floor vote, but they were, because it would have exposed, more than the 6 that I'm watching. It would have exposed a lot more elected officials to show that they actually do support exceptions. And so,
hold on, pause. I have to harp on that. You're telling me, from your viewpoint, you don't believe we didn't ban the abortion pill because it could have allowed exceptions through amendments. You believe that we didn't ban it because Republicans were protecting the 6 Republicans that are okay with exceptions on not taking a hard vote?
There's only 6 that have already put their name out there. I think there's a lot more that would vote that way.
But I think there's a lot more that want to vote that way, but out of pressure might not.
True. Yeah. So, but no, absolutely. It wasn't because...
Can we get that list?
Because, yeah, sure. So, but we could have defeated it. Like, okay, let's say worst case scenario, and I talked through this with several people who could have made it happen, is, okay, worst case scenario, your bill comes up, a bad amendment gets on that, even though it wouldn't be germane, it affects all of our other pro-life laws, right? You have the parliamentarians going to keep that from happening. You have points of orders that keep it. Okay, even if it's just your bill. So let's say we have a bad exceptions amendment on your bill, and oh no, it's 60 or 77 to whatever. Okay, so that gets passed. That's bad. Then you pass it out of the House, or you vote it down. You just say, you have messed up my bill. I take it down. Okay, no, let's say that doesn't happen. Well, then it goes over to the Senate. What does the Senate do? Are they, the Senate? Then
There's
worst
no
case
shot
scenario,
the Senate's gonna let
it gets to Abbott, and we have to say, Abbott, this was a good idea, but they've corrupted it. They're going to hurt our laws, and he vetoes it.
And he would.
There was no danger, but just they stopped it. So anyway,
that's so frustrating as a legislator, because you just hear all of the arguments, and coming in as a freshman, it's you really have to know going in. This is why all these freshmen, look, we've got some incredible challengers to some incumbents that are liberal R's right now. That I'm going to be, outspokenly endorsing. I'm going to say it right now, because by the time this podcast is released, I will have already done this publicly. But I'm endorsing Mike Alcott against Glenn Rogers, which is just going to be incredible. And the reason that I am is because I watched the way Glenn voted this session. And I'm looking at Mike Alcott and I'm saying, is the time now to participate in the incumbent protection program? Or is it to take ground for the conservative movement in Texas?
Yeah.
I believe Mike Alcott is going to be that candidate.
He's the real deal.
He's the real deal. And so looking at these issues, we have to educate Texans to know that we can't believe the lies anymore. We can outlaw the abortion pill in Texas. It is possible.
Well, so the issue is your team wants to keep moving, so we got to keep moving. I'm seeing the signals and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, but the abortion pills are illegal.
Yeah.
It is illegal, right?
Yeah.
So right now you can't go to your doctor and ask for that. Okay. It's the mailing in that is illegal, but it's not, we have to stop it. So, a law is only as good as the enforcement mechanisms attached to it.
Yeah.
So what you're talking about is not making something illegal. It's actually stopping the illegal behavior.
Yeah.
And so we completely agree. And there's several different angles to get at that. You could go with the credit card processors. You could do civil liability on the websites, on the internet providers. Like, there's several different angles. We don't have a silver bullet yet, but as Texans, we need to start swinging.
Yeah.
Right? It was kind of like under Roe, I was fighting for the 20-week ban. Then we moved up to the dismemberment abortion ban, and then we moved up to the to anti-discrimination and outlawing abortions if there's a discriminatory element to it. Like, there was no silver bullet, right? We couldn't have just taken down Roe, but we started swinging. And Texas was at its best when every session it was taking another swing. And so you see, leading up into the overturn of Roe to 2021, now 19 is the exception. 19 was a terrible year. But before that, every session we were doing more and more on pro-life, more and more on pro-life, until we had this historic victory. That's how we have to do with some of these new trends. Now, the other part, so you have that enforcement issue. On your adoption bill, tell us, though, what your adoption bill did, because this is a huge thing, and it's not the bad, mean side of pro-life. It's the pro-life means we actually support life. We actually want women to flourish and to overcome barriers in their life. And so tell us about that. It was
it's big. I think we had to answer the question that I feel like was our greatest feedback from the, I would say, moderate Americans out there that probably meant well in the way that they would say this. And after a while, I was kind of offended at that it was even a question that they would ask. But then I was like, okay, let's acknowledge the question and let's answer it properly, which was, are you pro-life or are you pro-birth?
Yep.
Right? That would always bother me when people ask me, I'm pro-life. Of course I'm pro-life. And then the question would always come up, well, what about those that are born? What about the lives that we do say? What are you doing for them? And it was a great question. My sister's adopted. Adoption's close to our heart. I think every one of us in this room has been affected by adoption. And so we look at, one of the most beautiful things that can be done is bringing in a life into your family and accepting them as your own and giving them a more beautiful and more prosperous life. And so, but when we look at the average cost of a private adoption, now I don't mean, foster to adopt, and that system has major issues in itself. We could have a whole episode, and we should, about CPS, but we won't go there, and about, DFPS, the issues there. And we're working to reform that. But when we talk about private adoption, we're talking about the average private adoption costs anywhere from $40,000 to $60,000.
It feels like you're buying a baby because
It
we're going
does.
through that process right now of just trying to go
Yes.
through it.
And it's a
And
nightmare.
it feels
What's the reliable number?
Sorry?
What's the reliable estimate on cost?
It's
45?
45.
45?
Yeah. And so 45 and then looking at it, and it depends on the agency, right? Which already feels weird, you know? And so part of that process is auditing, these agencies to understand what those costs are all going to. And we did a full audit of talking to those agencies. And, some of them are, and I can't speak for every agency, but we spoke with some incredible agencies that are doing the right thing. And so we're looking at this cost and we're saying that's not even possible for a middle income family in Texas, which in all actuality, we want to be able to adopt. And so all of a sudden, I had the thought, well, I don't believe that government is the solution for all things, because that's how we get the welfare state. That's how, we saw the downfall of middle America to begin with. And so what we did was we said, who is the answer to this from a biblical standpoint? It's the church.
Yeah.
It's the church. And so if we believe that the church is the answer, then we need to do something to partner with the church. And so this bill, the Adoption Assistance Program, I was really proud to help write, which essentially just said if a church or a nonprofit, I should say, we kept it to total 501c3, because if there's a 501c3 that wants to help, fantastic. If they want to sponsor a family for a private adoption, what we created is just a grant program that says, hey, we'll match those funds to make adoption free in the state of Texas, which sounds so easy. And so it's just the funniest thing. Like when we create these, immediately what you'll get is Republicans who aren't serious about meeting this need will hit you with the question of, well, Nate, what about the fiscal note? Which, don't get me wrong, I'm a fiscal conservative. However, when we began to research with DFPS, the amount of money that's going to be saved from the foster care system and not funding a child from birth till 18, this is a fiscally responsible solution, because it paled in comparison the small investment to help with those adoption costs compared to what it takes to raise a child through the foster care system, not to mention the trauma that happens in the foster care system.
I think this would be a great point to drop in that clip from Yaku.
Yes.
We can talk about that, about how it's not meant to raise a child. It's
No.
going to traumatize a child to make money.
Yes, it absolutely is. And the foster care system is inverted from where it should be. In other words, they're incentivized to keep a child in the system, not to get a child out of the system. And so financially. And so this bill was very simple and, in fact, got a lot of traction. I mean, even to the point where, Dr. Greg Bonin jumped on as a joint author of this bill. If you don't know, Dr. Greg Bonin is a very powerful member of the Texas House. He carries a lot of weight. And so we look at this bill that carried tons of traction, got through into the committee process. And all of a sudden, in the committee process, I had two people vote against it. One was a Republican who was, in her words, Lacey Hull, says, hey, this bill, while I get it, it's not something that I'm for, because we should be fixing the foster care system, not doing this. To which my response was, the two are not mutually exclusive. We can do both. The other one was a Democrat that was offended that the income threshold was too high. In other words, she believed that I was wanting to give rich families children that were abandoned by poor families.
What did you have it at?
So at the time, I had it at a very high threshold, because I wanted a family of 8 children who was very wealthy to be able to bring a child in, and it was $400,000. That was the threshold from when you couldn't. And I said, you know what? That's fine. We will lower that barrier to $150,000 and have it taper off from there.
Okay.
And so it was a $50,000 tapering period that we did just to get it across the finish line. So, but ultimately, we got it all the way there, and then it gets to calendars committee. And John, you've seen this 1,000 times. You've seen it. It gets to calendars committee. I, as a freshman, think we've won. We've got this.
It was so
right?
sad. It was so sad to burst your bubble.
And just for the record, our fiscal note in the budget was approved. Like we got it. That's half the battle of any bill. We get it all the way there. It's on the calendar for the day. I was fired up. And I didn't understand the politics of they put it so far low on the schedule that they didn't want to have to say, calendars didn't want to have to say, we killed the adoption assistance program.
Yep.
So they said, oh, we did our best.
We ran out of time.
We ran out of time.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can kind of see the march up to that deadline. And you know, if it's not scheduled for Tuesday of the last week, it's dead. And it's this game that they play every session of they'll just put everything, every bill everybody wants. They'll put it on the schedule for the last 2 days before this deadline. And then they can say, oh, well, it got to the floor. We just didn't get to vote on it. Not to mention there's 700 of those bills on the list. So they were never going to get to it.
John lobbied this bill harder than I've ever seen.
This bill was
lobby
this. Okay, so you've heard the bill. I had pastors, I had friends who hate politics.
Yeah.
I hate politics too, by the way. But they despise it. They never come to the Capitol. They never write in. They sent in messages for your bill. And I texted all these friends who I was like, hey, I know you're not political, but you are for adoption, right? And one of my best friends who's he is the most cynical guy when it comes to politics, but his daughter is adopted, and so he wrote in a message, and it was like the only time I'm ever going to get him to engage the legislature. And so you had all of this support because it makes sense. It is so simple, and it makes sense that yes, let's do everything we can to make it more affordable. Yet the slow walk killed it.
Yeah.
And honestly, I would say 80% of it was because of your first day in session.
Totally. Voting against the speaker.
It was because of who you are and what you voted for. It had nothing to do with the issue, which is not an excuse. It's actually that's actually a terrible thing.
Yeah.
Is that you have Republicans like Lacey Hull who will because I think Shoes was just politically motivated.
Yeah.
I don't think it had to do with the bill at all.
And that was single-handedly the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Well, but we answered all the questions that their office came up. We even had a Democrat office that was trying to convince her to vote for this thing. And so
crazy?
It was like
wild.
So I think
You're
we overcame all of
adoption
that.
of children, you've got demons, and you need to be like.
It was because of who you are, and I think, and I may be wrong on this, but my assumption would be any of the Republicans that were slow walking it, it was because they thought they were like on the speaker's team and they were doing the speaker a favor.
Totally.
Now, the way, and I've seen this, for 14 years, the speaker doesn't go and say, hey, can you do this for me?
Correct.
And I don't know. He even liked the bill.
Yeah.
And his staff even liked the bill. But it was these lieutenants. And some of the guys that were challenging in the primary right now are people who have been empowered by the speaker. And he doesn't have to say, go do this. And I don't even think he would want them to kill that bill. But they thought, oh, I'm going to get more credit for, going and beating up on Nate because of his first vote.
Can you imagine that? Can you imagine the evil nature?
We're coming for your spots.
Say it again.
We are coming for these spots.
It's and you see bills all the time from unexpected sources that you're like, oh, like cool, I'm voting for, I'm voting for, this.
When a Democrat throws a great bill in there, you're like, oh, look, we can find common ground.
But that's what like voting by principles, being by principles. And that was to me what was so frustrating because I had one Democrat office that like they were championing this thing. Yeah. They were a lot more senior than you. Yeah. They were making calls. I know they railed into the Democrat that voted against it on committee. Yeah. And they lectured her about it. Yeah. And so it's like, there were people that were working this bill because it was so common sense. Yeah. And once you explained it, people were like, well, that's the very least we can do. And so, it was very disappointing. We have, we got to do a better job of getting pastors. A lot of pastors are like, what can our church do? This is not political. This is pro-adoption. We got to get, congregations, and we got to get more people. And we've already been, kind of building up that network to help you out on this.
Yes.
But this is
mark my words. If we pass any bill next session, this is the most important bill to me. Mm-hmm. And part of that is, and I say this publicly, I've said it publicly, if I'm not the one who carries that bill in my heart, that's okay. Like, to know that passed is the only thing we can. I learned a very valuable lesson, and I heard this from a senior member who's a Republican, and he's a good guy. And he just told me, he said, hey, you've got to understand, and this is a very, very evil thing about the Texas House. I think it's juvenile. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's irresponsible. And I do think it's evil. However, he didn't create this rule. He was just relaying the rule to me because it's true. He said, as a freshman, I don't care if you'd have done everything they wanted. They weren't going to give you a bill that meaningful.
Yeah.
And it was this, and he said that to me when it died on the floor, and I was crushed.
Yeah.
And again, he's the messenger. It's not his fault, which is why I'm not naming his name. But he's right. Mm-hmm. That's the twisted nature of the body that we serve in. It is more about political power and political prowess than it is about principle. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And so in order to get this bill passed, this next session, you will see me hand that off to the one. Mm-hmm. If I don't think I can get it done, I'm handing it to the one who can.
Yeah.
Because we're getting that bill passed. And I'm going to work my tail off behind the scenes to not take credit, but to hand it to the one who can. Yeah. Because that's what this comes down to, is getting this good policy passed.
Yeah. All right, we've got to start landing this plane.
Go for it.
Like,
Let's
this
land
has
it.
been great. But I do want to talk about what this means from a federal standpoint.
Okay,
we
good.
have to hit presidential candidates and what this looks like if a federal abortion ban is even realistic at this point. I know a lot of candidates have said we've got to be realistic about this, and I hate that.
I want you to speak to
I
this.
hate that so much, but I want to hear your perspective.
This is your area when it comes to the legislation side and understanding deep levels of policies. I'll just start it with this. We have to first, in 2024, get a stronger majority in the House.
Yep.
That's going to be the key. We have to win back the Senate.
Yep.
If we do those two things, it opens the door for a potential federal ban on abortion.
Yep.
If we don't do both of those things, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Because the Senate will always kill whatever the House puts over there, now that they have the majority in the Democrat Party over there. And the House is such a small majority. I think we're down to, now that Santos is out, I think we are down to we're winning by one. And so if we don't gain seats in the House, I don't believe we have enough conservatives to put a federal abortion ban. Tell us the implications of a federal abortion ban. What do you believe about it?
Yeah.
And do you believe that it will be signed by a president?
Yeah. So in Dobbs, the court said that the abortion issue is now up to the people and their elected officials and their elected representatives. And that does not mean states. So some people were like, oh, it's an issue back to the states. No, it means it's to the legislature, federal and state. Okay, so if you go and look at their wording in the conclusion, people and their elected representatives. Okay, so that means our congressmen. Okay, so for me, yes, absolutely. We should be swinging for the fences federally.
Yeah.
We should be introducing that bill, making Democrats, every time we can bring it to the floor, getting Democrats to show where they are in this issue, getting them to show that they actually don't believe in equality. They don't believe that every human being should be protected. We have to continue to push this. But also the highest virtue in politics, well, in life, is prudence. And so we do have to be prudent. And there are other things right now that are probably more achievable in federal government than, say, a 6-week ban or a 15-week ban. We have to keep doing both. In Texas, we've done that. Okay, so every session, I would have the bill that is like swinging for the fences while the good governance stuff, the other stuff, like we passed a bill. It's the most boring bill in the world. It's to make sure that insurance companies can't put abortion in their in their kind of default plans. It is like nobody's going to rallies for this thing. Nobody cares about this thing. Like, it is the wonkiest bill, but it saved lives because it kept abortion out of our insurance for city employees, for state employees. I mean, it was a huge win in 2017. Nobody went to that, right? In 17, everybody knows, oh, you know, we did this dismemberment abortion ban. That was the thing of like protecting children from one of the most violent types of abortion out there, of dismemberment. And so it's like, you got to do both. You got to swing for the fences and you got to do the good governance. We have problems with our VA right now. Like, the Biden administration is trying to turn veterans hospitals into abortion clinics, right? We have some funding that has gotten around the Hyde Amendment, where funding is still ending up in abortion providers because of, you know, these massive budgets that kind of get around some of our pro-life initiatives. We have embryo destroying research being funded by the NIH.
Wow.
And so, like, there are real big issues that actually I'm more optimistic we could get across the finish line if we took seriously. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff that we have to keep doing. So I would say, yes, do the big bill, do the 15-week bill, let's go talk about the pain, that children can feel pain in the womb by 15 weeks. Let's go talk about that. Let's get those Democrats on the vote. But we need to be prudent in what is actually going to get to the to the desk of the president, and let's make sure that we're honest about that. So I say yes to both. The Senate is more difficult. We don't have the votes in the Senate right now because we have to get to 60, and we don't have those numbers. And we've lost, some of our more reasonable Democrats who would join us on these kind of things. And so we got to keep fighting, keep working, while doing some of that other stuff that we could probably get Democrats to, go and make sure that the VA hospitals are not being abused and kind of going through those things. So yes, we got to do that. Then that ends on the president's desk. Who the president is, absolutely critical.
Well, and I'll say this.
Yeah.
Out of the Republican nominees right now, the two front-runner Republican nominees, and this is no serious surprise to anyone, but between Donald Trump and between Ron DeSantis, I firmly believe if a bill were to land on their desk for a 15-week ban, I cannot imagine a day where either one of them don't sign it.
Right.
Because of the absolute war that believers would have.
Yeah.
That we would get that far. They would lose instant support from the church, instant support from believers. Now, I would hope that that's not the reason that they wouldn't sign it, but I just can't see a day that maybe that's just me. I can't see a day where a Republican president doesn't sign that bill.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you're right is that there were a lot of times where President Trump, there's no argument. President Trump has the strongest pro-life record of any president.
Yeah.
Okay. He's not my favorite president, but he has the strongest record when it actually comes to what was accomplished. Okay. Nobody can argue that. So you're absolutely right. What he has been saying is absolutely worries me, though.
Yeah, totally.
And it changes from interview to interview, to be fair. He's usually talking about his opponent, not the policy, right? I think that's why he said he didn't like what Florida did, just because he was trying to take shots at DeSantis, right? So, and there are plenty of times when he changes his opinion from day to day. So, take him seriously, not literally, right? So it's like, I get it, right? Yeah. I'm not writing him off. However, to have a candidate that is taking cheap shots at pro-life wins in other states, that is absurd. Yeah. That's absolutely absurd. He, in one sentence, brags about overturning Roe v. Wade, and the next sentence says, what they're doing in Florida is terrible. So it's just extremely frustrating. I don't think it's too much to ask for a candidate to be consistent from interview to interview on this issue.
And in fairness, this will be the last thing I ask, and then Taylor, Carrie, whatever. One of the things that I'll speak to my side, and I want to hear your side. When I hear the polls say, Nate, we'll never win another Republican race, I always go back to, the polls said Hillary Clinton was going to win in 2016.
Yeah.
The polls are typically weaponized by the media to push a narrative and an agenda.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, but I'm not willing to bend a knee on the life issue to win an election, in the same way that I'm not willing to bend a knee on any Christian conservative value to win an election. Because for us, it is about ideology. It is not about winnability. And I know that's an unpopular position to hold as a politician, but let me never win another election if I win an election by being pro-choice.
Yeah.
And it's just absurd because I think at that point, the battle, like you've said over and over, it's spiritual. Yeah. We're dealing with a spirit in America. For those who truly believe we have to be weak on life to win an election, then I don't want to win an election if that's the case. And that's just me. And so what's your take on that?
Yeah, so I mean, we can't ignore the polls. Like, we cannot ignore what happened in Ohio. We can't ignore what happened in Virginia and Kentucky. Yeah. Like, these are warning shots.
Yeah.
And I think the real point is, okay, what do we learn from them? I think we learned that our candidates and our organizations have to go toe-to-toe with the blatant lies that is coming from the other side. It's
good.
And we didn't see that. Now, in Ohio's a different case because they were fighting. They put a lot of investment. They invested a lot in the campaign. They had a couple of good commercials. They weren't as well funded. But in Kentucky and Virginia, they ran away from this issue and they paid the price for it.
Yeah.
So there were just a constant stream of blatant lies about what pro-life laws do, what the purpose of pro-life laws are, and our guy said, "Oh yeah, so back to the economy," and so that lost them those races, in my opinion, is by avoiding this issue. So that's number one. And this doesn't really matter for the next couple of months, but when we get to the Ted Cruz race, that is absolutely going to be critical, is because that is the playbook. We already know what that statewide race is going to be, and it's what we saw in Ohio, it's what we saw in Kentucky and Virginia. And so they are going to be the blatant lies, about miscarriage, that our laws affect the care of a woman whenever she experiences the tragedy of a miscarriage. It's about medical emergencies, that somehow our laws, are putting women in jeopardy, but they can't get the care that they need. That somehow we have this, the purpose of pro-life laws is to punish victims of rape. I mean, it is these blatant lies. Yes. We have to face them. And so I'm not worried about what voters think whenever the truth is told. I'm worried about what voters think whenever the lies are going unanswered. That's what I'm worried about.
Solid.
Yeah.
That's really good. Okay, so I think we should go into final thoughts.
Good.
Let's specifically target what we can do to get into this fight more. Like, what y'all are doing y'all's job, but what can people like me do to jump into this?
I'll answer just from a point of, we're going into primary season right now. And I think if you haven't asked your current representative on a state level, and that's what I'd like to speak to, his views on the tough issues as it relates to life, whether it be the abortion pill or adoption, are they willing to go to bat for this? Then that's someone that you should not support. We've got to really look at our Republican nominees and make sure that we have the right fighter in place going into November, not just about getting a fighter. And it's not we can't look at, are they the most well-funded? We have to look at, are they the most principled and ideologically sound on the issues that we care about? We do that through our friends and family lists and making sure that people understand who they are. I would encourage you today, if you're watching, that if you have a representative that is not endorsed by Texas Right to Life that's running for the state of Texas, I would challenge you to go find the person that is endorsed by Texas Right to Life, because these guys are the best when it comes to vetting candidates and making sure that they're truly going to stand for life.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a spiritual battle. So it sounds trite, but prayer is the first thing. And that's what I tell all of my friends, whether they're political or not, is this is a spiritual battle. And it's coming to the surface, and we'll see it in our statewide race coming up, even in Texas, is there is going to be, there is going to be an effort to lie to Texans, to make them think that the truth is false, to that the good is evil. There's going to be a real blatant effort to get to their minds and to get to their hearts. And so, pray for our elected officials, pray for our leaders of organizations, pray for those candidates that are running in those tough races, pray for our pregnancy centers outside of the political sphere, those that are serving women every day. I consider them frontline, right? I can deal with duplicitous politicians. I'm pointing to them. Sure. I'm not pointing that you're one of them.
No, you're right though.
But you see them every day in the Capitol. I can deal with those guys all day. It is nothing. I'm not the front lines. The front line is that volunteer at the pregnancy center down the road who is talking to a woman tomorrow morning and helping her overcome those challenges in her life. That is, so pray for them, for the pregnancy center. So prayer is the first one. The second one is to join a pro-life group, right? To find, you've got great pro-life groups here, groups like Able Speaks up here in DFW, one of my favorite groups. They are supporting families that are going through, through hard health situations when their children has a life-limited diagnosis. They are doing ministry. They are doing hard work and helping these families walk through some of the hardest days of their life. go support a pro-life ministry, a pregnancy center, join Texas Right to Life, see what we're doing. So join the efforts that are already going on. And then the third point is speak the truth. Right now, the war looks like not going and voting, not running to the Capitol. It looks like speaking the truth about the humanity of the child and the inhumanity of elective abortion. We have to, and right now, this cultural conversation around our topic is where we're losing. Yeah. Those lies are going unanswered. So you think, oh, well, my friends on social media know where I am. Just dedicate once a month, at least once a month, putting up an article. I've got an article on our website, texasrighttolife.com, about miscarriages and how pro-life laws do not affect the treatment of a woman who's experiencing the tragedy of miscarriage. Just sharing that and saying, hey, I've heard people complain about this. I wanted to make sure, I knew the truth. If you have questions, ask. Okay. So just sharing a truth, just sharing, embryology, kind of what's going on in the womb. Oh, it's like there's so many things going on that we can highlight the truth. Medical emergencies, big conversation right now about how pro-life laws affect the practice of medicine whenever a woman's experiencing a tragedy in a health situation. Lies in media, unfortunately, medical journals. And we've got great stuff on our website to share. There's a lot of pro-life ministries that are doing that. But I would encourage your audience, take an active role in spreading the truth and fighting lies, because you're not going to get voters on your side if the lies are going answered. You're not going to have the votes in the House for your bill if they go unanswered, right? And so that's absolutely critical, is that we kind of really stand up and speak the truth right now.
I think of all the things we've said, if we take a clip of that and just blast that throughout the world, I think we're going to see a big turnaround.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we're afraid of truth.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah. It was my media director. I'll just one thing here. My media director, Kim, she's amazing. She was explaining this to us the other day. She said it used to be that the argument when the media would cover our issue is that they would attack pro-life legislation and our position as being true. They would say, "Oh, it's not true. It's it's like a bunch of cells. It's not a real baby." So they were saying, "Hey, what pro-lifers are saying is false." That used to be what they're doing. Now they're attacking whether it's good or not. So they're saying, "Yes, it's a baby, but it's bad. A pregnancy is a bad thing." Right? It's not a blessing from the Lord. It's actually a burden. It's actually going to keep you from graduating. It's going to keep you from getting that career you want. Wow. So no longer are we talking about truth or falsehood. We're talking about good and evil. And they are claiming what is good, what is a blessing, what is one of the amazing things of creation, calling it a bad thing, an evil thing. Wow. And so that just shows you the depth of this truth versus lies cultural conversation that we have to take seriously, right? This is not just, oh, we need better talking points, we need marketing, we need, better websites. No, this is a spiritual battle.
I believe in my heart of hearts, the day my parents chose life was the day that the Lord wired reformation into my DNA.
Yeah.
And nothing makes me angrier than devaluing human life. And I truly believe that the world is going to shake because of what the Lord's put on us in this podcast.
Yes.
Because people have to know about this.
Amen.
And so I think this is a good spot to end. You guys, that was flipping wild.
I'm sure you have more notes.
I have so
We didn't even get close to what you wanted to cover.
We're going to have to do a part 2 soon.
We'll have to do a part 3. This is going to have to get split up into four sections. To our listeners who have just held on this entire time, we love you guys. Thank you so much to our listeners. We're so grateful to each and every single one of you for your support. Countless listeners have just donated to what we're doing so that we can continue to do what we're doing. Nate, John, you guys, we need to just clone y'all on a mass scale. And
that's actually another episode on the life issue. We got to talk about cloning.
I know what we just talked about, but we need some work done. And I'm just thankful for you guys. I know I said it at the beginning. I can't honor y'all enough for what y'all do. And I hope you hear my heart in this and feel the honor, because I can't even convey just how much I appreciate you guys.
Love you.
To our listeners, make sure you're following us and Texas Right to Life. Do you have an Instagram?
Of course.
Okay. Follow them on all the socials. Follow us on all the socials. Make sure you're never missing an update. We're going to post updates, news alerts, serving opportunities, prayer requests. We're also going to be posting about a lot of our For Liberty and Justice events. And if you're local, you're not going to want to miss out on that, especially our helicopter hog hunt.
Yes.
Once again, my name is Taylor, and thank you so much for listening to the For Liberty and Justice podcast, where we mobilize the church, wake up the city, and take a stand for liberty and justice. See y'all next week.